verse 1.
Recording in
Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian handmaid named Hagar. So she said to Abram, "The Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my maidservant. Perhaps I can build a family through her." Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai his wife took her Egyptian handmaiden, Hagar, and gave her to her husband to be his wife. And he slept with Hagar, and she conceived. When she knew she was pregnant, she began to despise her mistress. And then Sarai said to Abram, "You are responsible for the wrong I am suffering. I put my servant in your arms, and now that she knows that she is pregnant, she despises me. May the Lord judge between you and me." "Your servant is in your hands," Abram said. "Do with her whatever you think best." And then Sarai mistreated Hagar, so she fled from her. The angel of the Lord found Hagar near the spring in the desert. It was a spring that is beside the road to Shur. And he said, "Hagar, servant of Sarai, where have you come from, and whence are you going?" "I'm running away from my mistress, Sarai," she answered. And then the angel of the Lord told her, "Go back to your mistress and submit to her." The angel added, "I will so increase your descendants that they will be too numerous to count." And the angel of the Lord said to her, "You are now with child, and you will have a son. You shall name him Ishmael, for the Lord has heard of your misery. He will be a wild donkey of a man. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him, and he will live in hostility toward all his brothers." And she gave this name to the Lord. She spoke to her, "You are the God who sees me." For she said, "I have now seen the one who sees me." That is why the well was called Ber Lahai Roi. It is still there between Kadesh and Bered. And so Hagar bore Abram a son, and Abram gave the name Ishmael to the son she had born. And Abram was 86 years old when Hagar bore him Ishmael. May God bless to our understanding and to our daily life the message found in this passage. And now may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be pleasing and acceptable in your sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Abraham is the ancestral father of three great world religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. In both Judaism and Christianity, Sarah, Abram's first wife, has been revered as the mother of Isaac, the miraculous son conceived and born in her old age. In the Jewish and Christian story, Sarah's servant Hagar played a secondary role by giving birth to Abraham's first son, Ishmael, while acting as a surrogate mother for Sarah, who could not have children. And surrogacy is always a mere means to a desired end. The meaningful importance of the surrogate diminishes after the end is achieved. In this case, after she had conceived and she was no longer felt to be valued by by Sarah, the meaningful importance of the surrogacy diminishes or comes to an end after the goal is realized. And thus, in both Judaism and Christianity, the story of Hagar has no continuing importance after the miracle baby Isaac is born, who surprisingly Judaism and Christianity revere more highly than the firstborn son Ishmael. This is a troublesome matter because Ishmael's privileged status in a patriarchal society as the firstborn is diminished both in the Jewish and the Christian traditions. Countless oral stories were told over the generations about the patriarch Abraham, and two of those stories were committed to the written word in the book of Genesis, and we read one of them today. The other we have not read. And the one that we read depicts a contentious relationship between Sarah and her servant Hagar, and causes Hagar to run away, which, incidentally, is the only means for slaves to escape from their oppressed condition, that is, to run away. The other story is found in Genesis 21, 8 to 20. And in that story, Abraham complies with Sarah's desire to get rid of Hagar and his son Ishmael. And he said to Sarah, well, Hagar is your property. You do with her as you wish. But in that story, he participates in the act by giving her some provisions as she prepares to leave his household. He is comforted, however, by God's promise that Ishmael will also become the father of a great nation. And later, God speaks to Hagar in the wilderness and also tells her that Ishmael will become the father of a great nation. Unlike the Bible, however, the sacred Muslim text, the Quran, gives a very prominent place to Hagar as the mother of Abraham's first son, Ishmael, who was blessed by God with the promise of becoming the father of a great nation. Most important, however, Muslims greatly revere Hagar as a woman of extraordinary faith and fortitude, whom they contend traveled alongside her husband Abraham to Mecca, where together they built the Kaaba, the holy site in Mecca, that is the central spiritual focus for Islam. And every good and faithful Muslim looks forward to the day when they can go to Mecca to touch the Kaaba. The spiritual significance of Hagar is enormous. Her trust in God as always present and willing to help the helpless has been a source of inspiration for every generation. She knew that God would never abandon her, and that was the essence of her faith, which is also the essence of Judaism and of Christianity and of Islam. That God is present everywhere, and that God is willing to be helpful to the helpless everywhere. And thus God accompanied her in the wilderness when all others had forsaken her. In the early 1990s, Dolores Williams, the first African-American woman ever to teach theology at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, wrote and published a book that she called Sisters in the Wilderness. She was a friend of mine, and her husband and I were colleagues at Vanderbilt University. Her book was inspired by Hagar's story of being a slave with no independent agency whatsoever, including control over her own body. She was forced to escape with her baby into the wilderness with no obvious means of survival apart from her trust in God. And that trust gave her the necessary courage to face the unknown dangers in the wilderness. Dolores Williams likened Hagar's faith and courage to that of African American women who endured centuries of misery as enslaved people whose bodies, together with those of their children, were owned by their masters, who bought and sold them like chattel. Yet enslaved African American women struggled against enormous odds to nourish and protect themselves and their children by doing whatever was necessary to survive. Their only resource lay in trusting that God was present and capable of making a way out of no way. And thus Dolores Williams likened Hagar's life to that of all women who are caught in the wilderness of strife, of hardship, of misery and trouble, whose only resource is that of trusting in God's abiding and helpful presence. Alas, the children of Abraham, Jews, Muslims, and Christians, are engaged today in a bitter war in the Middle East, the seeds of which were planted many centuries ago. Though patriarchal societies have never been ideal for the well-being of women, the agency of women working together remains a necessary condition for human flourishing. And thus Dolores Williams' book laid the foundation for African American women's theology, which is called womanist theology, a term borrowed from Alice Walker's book, The Search for Our Mother's Gardens. Walker became the first woman to win a Pulitzer Prize in fiction for that book, The Color of Purple, that Steven Spielberg turned into a movie starring Oprah Winfrey in her first movie, and it earned her a nomination for an Oscar. Despite the high spiritual renown afforded Sarah in Judaism and the high spiritual renown afforded Mary in Christianity and Hagar in Islam, the status of women in general has remained very low in all three of those religions and in the societies in which those religions have been dominant. Might it be that all women, including Sarah, Hagar, and Mary, have been and remain always subject to patriarchal power. In fact, even God is viewed and worshipped as a benevolent patriarch who demonstrates in both word and action that men and women were created equal, a claim that still awaits fulfillment in our common world. That's the end of the message today. I wonder how you feel about it, and what are your thoughts? Don't all speak at once.
I was hoping that you were going to give us some solutions or some answers or something that would give us hope that this would change in the near future. But I don't know if there's answers to it, Peter. Um, it's always been an interesting story to me to try to understand. I mean, first of all, who gets pregnant at the age that Sarah got pregnant anyway? You know, in their times, it always was like, how did that happen, Lord?
Right.
You know? But I know that the Lord makes all kinds of miracles and things happen. So I just have always been confused and wondering what was the purpose of this, if this was the beginning of all of our religions that we know about, not within the last few thousand years anyway. Why has it not been a way, why has this story not been a way of healing rather than of separation, which it seems like every
It's puzzling, and that's why the sermon ends with a puzzling note. And it's that God created humans equal, men and women, but yet the power of men, in this case and in many other cases, have taken control and rendered women subordinate and to be nothing more than property and channels for the creation of more people who will enter into the same kind of situation. It's a puzzling story, but yet the Bible doesn't sugarcoat the realities. It presents the realities the way they are and the way they have always been, but doesn't really give the final answer, because the answer needs to be worked out, I guess, and incrementally. And will the answer ever be fully achieved? Well, in the end of time, it will be, we promise, because God will then be completely in control. But God, by making humans free, have sort of run the risk of humans really messing up the creation, which they have done from the beginning of time up to the present. Yes, Heather.
It's always interesting to, when you were sharing the different perspective from Christianity and Judaism and
Right.
Islam, is to think about that story and how we've heard it and how we, maybe as a general group, kind of look at Hagar as, you know, I mean, it's very clearly put in there, you know, she kind of got a little overconfident, or, you know, and she was kind of rebellious against her mistress and all this stuff. Or was she? You know, or was she? Or was it just that Sarah was insecure?
Yeah.
You know, and she was jealous.
Yeah.
Hagar didn't do anything except maybe smile at peace that she had a baby, that she was carrying a baby. I mean, it's just how the story was told, and she's kind of the bad guy. Um, but was she? And she certainly wasn't to another group of people.
Sure.
So
And her condition was such that she was a piece of property, control of Sarah's
Right.
property, and Abraham's property.
right.
And the question was, how could she ever be content with that state of being?
Mhm.
And so she demonstrates in an overt way, her anger towards her mistress. And here she is being used by the mistress as a surrogate for the mistress to have a child that the mistress
Wanted.
wanted,
Right.
and will make her feel whole, and she's supposed to be content with this.
Right.
Well, it
Right.
demonstrates that she wasn't content,
Right.
and nor can anybody be content under these circumstances. So there's the realism again that is depicted here in this very, very simple story.
Mhm.
It's a powerful story. And then she sort of drops out of having great importance. Hagar drops out of having great importance for Judaism and for Christianity. And Sarah is seen as the mother of the nation, which is corrected then by the Muslims who give her a place of prominence. Yes.
We have someone on Zoom who is saying, I'm confused, was the Quran written before Muhammad was around? How could they be talking about Hagar and Ishmael going to Mecca? I thought Abraham was well before Jesus and Muhammad was around in maybe the 500s.
Yeah. Well, the written stories are taken from oral traditions, and the oral traditions were around for hundreds and hundreds of years before they were put into writing, and then they would be put in writing selectively by various people. But it is out of sync with some aspects of the oral tradition. The oral tradition is told differently, even as we in our own families, if we listen to the tradition, the oral tradition by the various members of our families, they will be told differently. They're not exactly the same. And and that sometimes can produce a lot of problems, as we will have a lot of problems here with the kind of text and the kind of trying to relate, sort of what really happened. Well, we will not ever know what really happened in any kind of scientific way, and there'll be a lot of contradictions in the way the oral tradition is presented, and when it is selectively taken and written down, it doesn't resolve the issues.
I just wanted to say that I really appreciated both the question and your answer, because I really love when people talk about the history aspect involved with the Bible and everything.
Right. Good, thank you. Yes.
I, of course, was really excited that you brought up Dolores Williams and her writings on this, which I do recommend for everybody. Sisters in the Wilderness. It's can be like a heavy book, in some ways academic, but if you have the time, it's really, really beautiful. Changed my life. And the thing that obviously people have named all of the issues in that world and in our world today. But I think the thing that brought me a lot of hope about her writing is not only did she liken Hagar to women today and their struggles, but also in their creativity and ways that they survived. The way that God promised Hagar and met Hagar and comforted her. and really gave her this way to sort of forge her way forward in a new way. I think is at least where I find some of the hope that God meets people in those wilderness experiences and gives them the way to survive, whatever that looks like, even if it's taboo or even if it's marginalized. Really gave her a way to make a way for her baby, and make sure that she had what she needed for Ishmael. And you know, the way that she was able to name God also in this way, the first person to name God.
Yes.
It just gives hope to those people that are invisible. And so, yeah, thank you for not solving but lifting up this woman who really is extraordinary. So thank you.
I have a quick question regarding that. Have we ever done Sisters in the Wilderness as one of the book studies here? Should that be added to the options in the future if it changed your life so much then and is relevant here? A bit heavier, you mentioned, and very academic inclined as well. Well, I was thinking because if it's very academic, having people work on it in a group could be helpful there.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for thank you for your comments, Bill. And the saga goes on. We're talking about the human condition, and the human condition, in some ways, has been a lot, very much the same, but yet it's been different, but yet still the same throughout history. And the Bible is a way of presenting, giving a portrayal of that dilemma and those dilemmas without providing a solution other than the solution lies in God and lies in faithfulness, faith in God, trust in God, that God is still in control in spite of the enormous mess that humans have made and continue to make in God's creation. And when we will see, presumably, the final solution in the finality of of creation, which is in the eschaton, the end, where all things will be made whole again. But will that be in our lifetime? Probably not. Yeah. But how do we? Our faith is not in the. Our faith is in God. That God, in God's time, will bring about the effective solution. But that can be very frustrating for us because we want it now and not well beyond our lives. Yeah. Well, God bless you as you continue to wrestle with these issues.